I'm joined now by Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Let me start right with that interview. You heard her say over and over again, effectively, that this shooting was the fault of the Biden administration, even as it was the Trump administration that granted the shooter asylum. What do you make of this?
Well, John, first, I join you in saluting the service and sacrifice of the National Guard members who were killed, and all of them. This is a desperate attempt of the Trump administration to blame everybody else in the world and not accept any accountability. As you pointed out in your interview with the secretary, it was the Trump administration that was last in time when it came to vetting. And I can tell you that they come before Capitol Hill, Secretary of Homeland Security, FBI director, and they tell us how they've improved the vetting processes. And now they're trying to blame everything on the Biden administration. This is a president who refuses to take accountability for anything.
It was also interesting that she said that he was radicalized here in the United States. So how do you vet if the radicalization happens here, it didn't happen in Afghanistan?
Well, that's a very good point. And she talked about, not talking with foreign governments. Of course, this is a person who worked with the CIA
for years.
For years. So the reality is that we really don't know what motivated him to take this particular act. We should, of course, always review our vetting procedures, but it's not clear, based on their own vetting, that you could have picked something up in this case.
You were a big advocate, I mean, a lot of people were, both parties, for bringing the Afghan citizens who worked with the United States during the War on Terror to the United States once the Taliban took over. Do you now have concerns that this might not have been a one-off, that there have been gaps in vetting and that there could be, more problems?
Well, we should always review our vetting, but in this case, there's no evidence that there was something that escaped the vetting. As you just said, as the secretary indicated, he might have been radicalized here. If that's the case, again, the most recent in-time vetting was by the Trump administration. But John, I do think it is outrageous and unfair to try to punish an entire class of people for the evil acts of one person. That is collective punishment. These are individuals who worked side by side with America in the fight against the Taliban. And if they were sent back now, the Taliban may likely kill them.
Might execute
them.
And Maryland is among the top 10 states in the country.
That's right.
With these Afghan citizens,
Yeah. I think this is just a desperate attempt by the Trump administration to blame others. And I will say, John, I think it's important to remember that General John Kelly told us that President Trump told him that Trump had thought that members of our military were suckers and losers. And I see the president's mindset toward our National Guard and military, suggesting that they're political pawns of his and that they owe allegiance to him and not to the Constitution of the United States.
So let me ask you about that Washington Post report on the attack on that Venezuelan alleged drug boat. What do you make of what happened there? Do you think there was a war crime committed?
Oh, I think it's very possible there was a war crime committed. Of course, for it to be a war crime, you have to accept the Trump administration's whole construct here.
That we're at war.
Which is we're in armed conflict at war with the drug gangs. Of course, they've never presented the public with the information they've got here. But it could be worse than that, right? If that theory is wrong, then it's plain murder.
The first strike is murder in that case.
That's correct.
You're alleging.
That's correct. Well, I'm saying that it's either murder from the first strike if their whole theory is wrong, and I think the weight of the legal opinion here is that they've concocted this ridiculous legal theory. But even if you accept their legal theory, that it is a war crime, and so I do believe that the Secretary of Defense should be held accountable for giving those kind of orders.
And this is happening as, of course, you have the Secretary of Defense also saying that he wants to bring Senator Mark Kelly back to active duty to put him before a court-martial for telling members of the military they shouldn't follow illegal orders. Let me ask you, if that happens, Senator Kelly's one of your colleagues, how will the Senate respond?
Well, the Senate would be in uproar because this would be a blatantly illegal act and another example of the president's abuse of power. the 6 that the president is talking about are people who served our country, unlike the president who decided not to go based on a bone spur, apparently. So we have here 6 real folks who have been dedicated to our country in the military who simply cited the law of the land, which is that our men and women in the military should follow lawful orders, which clearly has become more important than ever right now, now that we have this disclosure about Secretary Hegseth essentially saying, kill them all.
Yeah. So let me, before you go, I want to also ask you about a New York Times story that I'm sure caught your attention, about a group of Democratic senators who call themselves the Fight Club of the Senate, who are pushing Chuck Schumer and others in leadership to fight harder against Donald Trump and his policy. The New York Times writes, the effort also amounts to an extraordinary preemptive challenge to Mr. Schumer at the earliest stages of the 2026 midterm races. They list your name first as a member of this Fight Club. What's the strategy here?
Well, John, first let me just say we are far more united as Democrats and Democratic senators than we are divided. I mean, we're all very focused on bringing down the health.
But you want Schumer to fight harder. I mean, that's true.
This is not just about one person. It really is about the entire caucus and how the whole caucus engages. We haven't talked this morning about the rising costs of health care or other goods in the country. That's the way Donald Trump likes it. But we are going to be very united in the fight coming up over the coming weeks to make sure that we don't allow those huge spikes in healthcare costs. Republicans don't have a plan, so we'll see how that plays out. But look, it should not be surprising that there are differences of opinion as to the best way to approach a particular issue, but our overall goals are the same. Take on a lawless Trump administration and bring down costs.
I've heard your name mentioned as a possible next Senate Democratic leader. We'll talk to you about that maybe next time.
That is not my focus. My focus is working with the caucus to make sure that we, again, achieve the objectives I just outlined.
All right, Senator Van Hollen, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, John.